Jake Butt, welcome to the Button Breneman Show.
Am I getting some of the sponsor money for this now? Is the
Yeah.
Button Breneman Show?
Yeah, we can get you some sponsor money. We can get you some sponsor money. Jake, appreciate you joining me. Today's guest, one of the smartest voices in college football, one of my good friends. He's got a rare perspective of someone who has lived it at every level in this sport. Two-time All-American at Michigan, drafted to the NFL, battled through a bunch of injuries in his career. Now one of the rising stars, maybe the rising star in college football broadcasting. You've seen him on Big Ten Network, on Fox. But what you might not know is how sharp Jake is when it comes to the business of college football, the evolution of athlete media, and where college football is headed. We're going to talk NIL, portal, what it takes to survive in broadcasting, and why the next few years of college football could completely reshape the game. Let's get into it. Jake Butt, welcome to the show.
You're flattering me. I'm blushing. I appreciate that. I don't know.
Is that a good intro? You
boosting
like
me up. Yeah. I appreciate it, man. I'm excited to hang out with you. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you. You and I have had a bunch of conversations about a lot of different topics. Your career is so interesting because of all the twists and turns, and from Ohio and went to Michigan, and all the success and the injuries, as I mentioned. But I want to start with more of the kind of evolution of college football and where it is right now. And I want to start with this: if you would have came out right now from high school, how much different do you think your life would have been with NIL as part of the conversation?
Man, yeah, that's a great question. I try not to spend too much time thinking about it. It would be different.
Me
It
too.
would be, my peak marketability was during my time at Michigan, and there was a lot of butt jerseys and butt autographs and butt memorabilia, and I didn't get a dime off of any of that. So, man, I'll tell you what, I think back though, like I'm glad it's this way, because I had like a run-in with compliance like my senior year where my freshman year, I used to cut my own hair in the dorm. I would just like buzz my own hair. And then by my senior year, I made friends with a guy, his nephew was serving in the military, big Michigan fan. And I sent him a jersey, and there was like no agreement. So like a few months later, he gave me a free haircut, and all of a sudden, like the compliance was like investigating me and wanted to suspend me for like half my senior season. And I just look back at that time, and I remember the conversations I was having that were just so illogical. It was like, okay, so you got a free haircut. So where do you draw the line? Who's to say you can't get a free car from your friend? And I'm like, do you hear yourself? Like, a free haircut. Find me a friend that's handing out free cars. I don't know a single friend and anyone in my life handing out free cars. Like that's where we were. That's us, talking about we can give bagels, but not peanut butter or jelly or cream cheese, So for some of the faults we have in the current game, I'm so thankful that these guys are finally able to capitalize, because my goodness, as well as anybody, it's big business. And it's right that this money is being shared with the players that are ultimately driving the product.
Yeah, it's really crazy how, with the NCAA, how dated and bureaucratic that organization was for the sport. And now we're seeing that the conferences themselves are now going to be the ones overseeing enforcement and the governing of the actual NIL revenue sharing, making sure the rules are followed. Because to be frank, the NCAA can't handle it. There would be no enforcement. So I think it's a good thing that this is now happening. And we've seen, just like, I mean, even what I went through at Arizona State when we got investigated there with the NCAA. I mean, Jake, that investigation. I mean, I had left Arizona State, gone through 2 years in college football media before they ended the Arizona State investigation. It took 3.5 years. And it's just a crazy organization.
Well, I think, the biggest the big like pain point is the hypocrisy and the disconnect in how the rules get enforced. And that I think that's the biggest thing, because we say we have this dream of like a perfectly fair and competitive balanced college football landscape, but that wasn't the case when we were being recruited. Mm-hmm. There was NIL going on before NIL was legal, but the enforcement of that was not fair or justified.
Yeah.
And I'm real curious, man, because you bring up a point about the NCAA's inability to enforce this. And the big reason is I think they're just scared to death of getting sued, because they have been getting sued and they're basically paralyzed. They can't move forward because they're going to get sued. And it's going to be brought to high court. And I put myself in their shoes. I just try to do this as a thought experiment. I don't know what they can do, seriously. And it seems like the
Yeah.
only path forward is, and tell me if you agree with this, we need like the players at some level to sit down and get ahead of this. And the players almost have to propose a CBA to say,
Yeah.
here's what it needs to be, because otherwise the NCAA can't be the first to bring this because they will just simply get sued.
Yeah, there's some organizations. One of them, the premier one is athletes.org. Jim Cavall have started kind of the first ever players union. It was interesting. I was at the college football national championship weekend. I think you were there too. Yeah, you were.
Yeah.
We had dinner when we were there.
Yep.
Um, and all the conferences are meeting about the future of college football. There's the SEC meeting, the Big Ten has their meeting, the ACC has their meeting. All the school presidents have their meeting. I mean, everyone's meeting about the future of college football, but who doesn't have a seat at the table? The
Yeah.
players, the most
Yeah.
important piece of the entire pie. And at that weekend of the college football national championship, athletes.org actually had the kind of first ever players meeting, players only college football meeting. And it's very preliminary. Obviously, what's the impact it'll have? I think it will have one in the future. But the fact that there is no collective bargaining for the players yet, that's the reason that the NFL has the NFLPA, as you were part of, because they need a seat at the table to be part. Like, how many games do college football players want to be able to play? The season keeps getting longer and longer with spring football. So at what point does that go to OTAs, and the players deserve a seat at the table? The thing that I think is so unique, or just the piece that's missing in college sports right now, is everyone refuses to use the dirty, dirty word of employee.
Yeah.
And it's funny, if you talk to administrators at dinner with no cameras, they all acknowledge it.
Yeah.
All the coaches, they're like, listen, the players need to be employees. That's what they are. They're employees. But everyone's deathly afraid to say it publicly because they don't want to get sued, to your point,
Right.
Jake.
Right.
Because once they open that can of worms, all the former players can sue them because they should have been employees and they weren't. So it's like everyone's dancing around this topic of the players, college football. That's the world we live in. But college basketball and all, they're employees, and they get paid like employees. They're now with revenue sharing, the performance. You get paid for your performance, all that kind of stuff, and that's an employee structure, and everyone refuses to say that word.
I mean, let's be honest. I certainly felt like an employee,
Yeah.
an unpaid employee, because they like to use the word student athlete, but I always found it ironic. Athlete came first because I wasn't allowed to take classes from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. in any of the major semesters, which eliminated like half the key, the good, um, uh, degrees that you could pursue. So tell me if you agree with this, though. It seems to me that if you asked most of the players, most of the coaches, most of the leadership across all conferences, I'd imagine like people agree on 80% of what they want the future to look like. So it's that fear of being sued that's holding us back. But I feel like we have most of the foundation agreed upon right
Yeah,
now to
no
move
doubt. And
forward.
I think what everyone wants is just a level playing field. The coaches are cool with the players getting paid. Everyone's cool with it.
Yeah.
It's just the difference in state laws, the difference in what everyone's allowed to do, how much can the school be involved. And I'm hopeful that we'll get there with revenue sharing. Jake, I want to ask you this. If Jake Butt was the commissioner of college football, what are you doing tomorrow? First thing you're enacting.
I don't even the first thing is I would go to every conference and have them police this. I would have the conferences go to every head coach and say, have the teams elect 5 to 10 representatives, and I want to hear from those players on what they want. And I try to time it up where it's not in a busy season. I would want to hear from the players what they want, and I'd like to, maybe plug it into AI, find, the common points that are agreed upon, and then I'd ask the coaches the same thing, and I'd ask the conference leadership the same thing. I think that's just like the obvious starting point so we can get some clarity, some structure on what everybody wants. But
Yeah.
again, It just feels like there's whispers going on behind the scenes, and everybody's
Yeah.
guessing at this point.
Who's your pick for commissioner of college football?
Saban is probably the obvious one, right?
Yeah, it has to be Saban, right?
Yeah, yeah. Joel Klatt does some great stuff too, and he clearly puts the time in and thinks about it. I think he'd do a good job. He's a trustworthy guy. I would want it to be someone that doesn't want the job, and that's just
Yeah.
like my philosophy of politics
It'll
in
get so
general.
political.
Saban doesn't need the money. Saban doesn't need the fame, but Saban clearly knows the intricacies of the game, and I think he would do right by the players. So,
Yeah. I
who
do
would
think
you
that's
elect?
one. I was going to say Saban. I mean,
Yeah,
you think about, you mentioned Joel Klatt, a guy like Herb Street. I mean, but who want? It has to be someone who's kind of retired, because like I don't think Herb Street wants to leave calling the biggest games in college football to go be the commissioner and deal with a bunch of chaos
yeah,
and stuff you don't want to deal with. I do think one of the biggest issues that college football has is the lack of an actual commissioner,
yeah,
because you think about who's in charge of college football. I like, if you say to me who's in charge of college football, Adam, I guess maybe Greg Sankey, the SEC
yeah,
commissioner,
yeah,
the Big Ten commissioner.
yeah,
But the issue is that the Big Ten commissioner is also in charge of women's basketball and
yeah.
lacrosse and swimming and diving and all these other sports that they have to make decisions for that their best interest as well. No one is like consistently looking after the best interest of college football itself.
Yeah, that's the complexity here. And I just wish we could, gosh, man, and this is just a culture thing too. Like, let's just call it what it is. Football is different from men's soccer or softball or track and field. It's quite simply different. If you ask the players of men's soccer, they would agree as well. I think everybody just wants what's fair, but we need to just call it what it is and start to acknowledge football as a completely different entity. Even,
Yeah,
basketball, and build in some fluidity for, women's basketball is exploding in popularity. Build in some fluidity for them to capture some of that growth down the line and keep the door open for other sports. But
yeah,
that is the big challenge, because we're asking those two commissioners and other commissioners to police this fairly. Well, what is fair? We haven't even defined that properly. Is it fair in the sense that everybody's equal, or is it fair that we acknowledge football is unequal from the other
yeah.
sports? We can't even agree on that.
Yeah. What do you think about the transfer portal currently, and how players can basically have unlimited transfer opportunities? And I love transferring. Like I think players should be able to do it. To ask a 17 or 18-year-old kid to like make the right decision one time is tough. Like I transferred in my career. What do you think about right now, just how much we're seeing guys transfer?
I'm with you that I think it's a positive, but I just think, like anything, we've probably overcorrected. And, you know, you also have to protect the players from themselves too, because it is a positive. You can't expect every player is going to make the perfect decision when they commit to school, but you also have to protect the players, because when I'm 20 years old, I'm not thinking long term. And I know, one example that comes to mind, a guy that was an All-American safety at Northwestern, transferred to play at Notre Dame, probably made a few $100,000, but didn't end up, his career didn't progress. Not only did he's not, living out his dream in the NFL either, to the extent he might have had he stayed at Northwestern. He doesn't have a degree from either Northwestern or Notre Dame. So
Yeah.
what's the opportunity cost of that? And I think there has to be, right now, there's zero thought or zero consequences for players transferring infinitely. I think we have to restructure our incentives, because right now we're incentivizing players to transfer every single year. I got friends that are in like tech sales, for example, and the current structure is, get a sales job for a year, and then the raise is actually to jump ship to the next
Go somewhere
company
else.
every single year. The incentives are messed up. I think what we should do is be able, and it requires being able to tie pay for play, which
Yeah.
is, okay, some of this money that we're paying you is going to be deferred until later. If you decide to transfer, you're going to forfeit some of the money that we're going to that we were planning on
Yeah.
giving you. That at least creates the thought where the players have to say, okay, I'm going to give up money, but that's because I truly
Yeah.
believe I'm going to a better situation. not that I'm just going to the next situation because I'm going to make more money tomorrow, if that makes
Yeah.
sense,
Yeah, and just like coaches have, just like we have in our media contracts, if you want to leave, there's a buyout. You
Yeah.
can't just
Yeah.
pick up and leave when you're under contract, and that's how it should be with the players. If you're getting paid 400 grand a year to play quarterback at some school, and you want to go somewhere else, someone's got to pay the $300,000 fee to break the contract, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's a base thing in every contract there is. So I think
And
you just put that in there, and it's easy.
I know you agree with this too. Like, and I'm not an extremist saying like the spirit of college football is gone.
You're a traditionalist though. You love the you.
In some levels,
If you could go back 20 years, you would do
yeah,
it.
probably so. But I also say this. I think the most important thing I could say is if you asked me, did I enjoy watching college football last year? Is probably one of the most joyful, full of parity seasons. So I'm not hitting the panic button. But what some of these guys, no one's asking the value of. Think about your friends and the relationships you made, and you stuck through some tough times at Penn State. There was some dark years for me at Michigan. We went through a firing of an AD and a coach, but we stuck it through. And those relationships have both monetary value in my current life and just like emotional, spiritual, relational value. And no one's educating the kids on the missed value of hitting the transfer portal every single day. One day this ends and you realize you have no meaningful
Yeah,
relationship. That's a missed opportunity cost
yeah.
that isn't being discussed
I
either.
think about the opportunities that have come in my career just from Penn State. I mean, just from going to Penn State, I was there
Yeah.
for 3 years, transferred, and just the amount of business opportunities, connections, people taking your calls. I mean, I'm in a business meeting yesterday. Like the first thing that, oh, you're the Penn State tight end, because it's
Yeah.
it's in Pennsylvania, and they know. So I do think that you never really get a true sense of being an alumni of somewhere. Where you
Yeah.
never get you go back to Michigan the rest of your life, you get treated like royalty every
Yeah.
single time. You're welcome
Yeah.
back. Where even be, I mean, again, I've had tons of Penn State's been awesome for me, like without a doubt. But I did transfer, so there is a little bit of like, being still going back and being around the team. Like I'm a guy who left Penn State and transferred somewhere else, so there is a little bit. Even it's very minor in my circumstance because of the semantics around it. But even I feel it, right? Like
Yep.
I did go somewhere else and have success somewhere else. Like, am I truly a guy who played all his whole career at Penn State? No. So I think there is things like that people don't realize.
And you're exactly right. And it's not to say that transferring's bad, but it's to say like at least someone needs to make the kids aware and the players aware of, okay, you might transfer and make 50K or whatever, and you might play more. And that's a big factor. Is some guys just want to play the sport they love. And especially at these big schools, you might be a 4-star that doesn't
Yeah.
pan out and you're not playing at Michigan or Penn State. But to
Yeah.
your point, like there's significant value in staying, even if it means sacrificing the near term and you might be uncomfortable and you might leave some money on the table. I just don't think anyone's presenting that option to the players. And I actually think the opposite has happened. We have bad actors of agents who
Oh,
those agents are incentivized because they're making 10% of these marketing deals.
yeah.
They're certainly not telling
10%,
the kids
maybe
hey,
20, 25.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Because it's
Yeah.
not even policed properly there either.
Yeah.
So like the whole structure has incentivized chaos. And
Yeah.
there will come a day when we recorrect and find some more balance. We're just
Yeah.
obviously not there yet.
I want to dive into broadcasting your media career a little bit. The first thing I want to ask is one of the cool things we get to do as broadcasters is throughout the season, each week we meet with head coaches. We get to sit down in person over Zoom with these coaches and usually offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and head coach and get an hour of their time to ask them questions. Jake,
Mm-hmm.
who's the coach that you sat down with that impressed you the most when you left the meeting?
That's a good question. I think one that comes to mind in just like the feeling that I get is Brett Bielema. Brett is a special guy. Like the first, and he recruited me in high school too, but he's got a special thing going. Kirk Ferentz and Phil Parker. Also, I mean, the knowledge and the continued success are, kind of stand out to me. The obvious ones are whoever's the head coach at Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, right? Like
Yeah.
those programs, you just walk into the building and you're like impressed.
Yeah.
Shiano, another
Yeah.
great one. Signetti, I called a early Indiana game last season, and you could just tell the temperature. Like I could judge it from where Indiana was the year prior to where it was when I was calling Indiana, Maryland, and the Hoosiers were rolling. And you could
Yeah.
just tell some coaches have something special, and we get the opportunity to see that behind the scenes, and
Yeah.
probably try to predict things ahead of when they actually happen.
Yeah. You mentioned Signetti. I would encourage the people listening to this, go back and listen to my interview with Kirk Signetti in maybe Noah, a producer, he would know when it was, maybe like April of last year, before the season, like way before the season. And listening to it is almost surreal because he calls a shot. I mean, he literally does it, and because you saw him when Indiana was good on game day, talking shit, being cocky, but he was doing it way before right when he got to Indiana. And he has a quote in it. He says something like, "This place has been pretty bad at football for a long time, so something's got to give, and it ain't going to be me."
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was like, man, he turned that place around fast. So you called a couple of their games last year, Indiana?
I, I called one game. It
Yeah.
was just Indiana, Maryland. Then I was there for the playoff, Indiana, Notre Dame. And I remember like he got hired and did the, you
Yeah.
know, rally at the basketball arena. And I
Yeah.
mean, the memes that were going on Twitter, people were like, is this guy lost
Yeah,
his mind?
remember his press conference? He said, "I win. Google me." Or something.
Yeah. And he called that first like pep rally. He's like, listen, we're coming for Purdue. And everyone's like, yeah,
Yeah,
obviously. And he's like, you know what? We're coming for Ohio State and Michigan too. And the memes that came out of that. But I
yeah,
do think like one, he knew he was going to back it up because of the work he bet on himself, like his career path, like he's been molded to that exact personality. But he also, he knows to win at Indiana, like, why are you taking a job ever if you expect to lose? Why are
yeah,
you committing to play for Signetti if you expect to lose? You don't
yeah,
have a home. And it was cool to see that come to fruition for him last year. And
yeah.
look, they got a good roster once again this year. I think they're going to be here to stay and be dangerous for years to come.
Yeah. So we talk. I talk a lot about just the business of college sports, and especially since I partner with Front Office Sports for the show. I'm curious. Take us through as a sports media, like rising star broadcaster, you're the number one analyst on Big Ten Network. Like, what are the different ways that you drive revenue for yourself right now? Like, what are the different areas where you're making money, where you have kind of a business operation around you?
Yeah, I think the way I've structured it too is I think probably the biggest thing is I'm 1099. So I'm a contractor with BTN, and I signed a non-exclusive deal. So that's like the major pot, the foundation, where I'm calling games every weekend, and then we have like an agreed upon amount of studio shows. So that's like just the major pot. And from there, I have a wide open off season. I have time during the week. I'm not doing shows with BTN every single day. So then the question is how I'm going to fill up my week. And that's part of why I moved to Chicago, because there's studios and opportunities here.
Mhm.
So I've been able to work with a regional network, Chicago Sports Network, covering the Big Ten, doing podcasts, and other things like that. And I think the key is having that 1099 structure and then being non-exclusive with BTN opens the door. So I think the ultimate goal, though, is you look at a guy like Joel Klatt or Kirk Herbstreit, where they're all under one entity. And it
Yeah,
takes some time to earn your stripes, where a company is willing to bet on you and give you that deal structure. But for
yeah,
guys like us that are young and hungry and trying to prove ourselves, we have to say yes to a ton of different opportunities.
yeah. What does when you're doing your deals between different TV networks? I know you've gone through, we've talked offline about different stuff. You've talked to different networks, and you've been with Big Ten, I think, the whole Big Ten network, the whole time you've been broadcasting. But I know you've talked to other networks, and every year, I mean, happens to me, happens to everybody. Other people come calling. What do those conversations, like negotiations, look like? Are you involved in that? Is that mostly your agent handling it all for you? How's that go once the off season comes?
Yeah, it's mostly my agent handles all of it. And what's exciting about this industry is it's every man for himself in a sense, because like of A booths, which is you're calling the top game. Like, I would love to call Ohio State, Michigan one day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there, and I don't know if is that always going to be Fox, maybe ESPN gets it, maybe NBC or CBS, but just do them. There's four major networks that potentially could have an opportunity
Yeah.
to produce that game. And there's how many of us gunning for those seats,
Yeah.
100 plus. So a lot of it is like staying patient and, maintaining a standard of, no matter if I'm calling a Michigan game or another team, like preparing like it is Ohio State,
Yeah.
Michigan, because you just don't know when those seats are going to open up. And it could be a 20-year journey before that opportunity comes. And you have to be willing to sacrifice for that.
Yeah. You obviously made money from your NFL career, getting drafted, your years in the league. You've made money in broadcasting now. What are you doing from an investment standpoint? What's your strategy with the money you're making? Real quick, guys, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor on this podcast, Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to fire on sports. I've tried all the different apps, sports books, daily fantasy. Prize Picks is the way. On Prize Picks, you're picking players instead of teams. So if you know sports like I do, you can make a bunch of money, especially with the free $50 bonus with code NEXTUP or the link in my description. All you gotta do is deposit $5. You get a free $50 in your account that you can use, go 10x, 100x, turn it into whatever you want. Code NEXTUP, $50 bonus, link in description. Let's go.
The best thing I ever did was I took out an insurance policy when I decided to come back for my senior year at Michigan. Obviously got injured in the bowl game, big part of my story, and slipped in the draft. And I got an insurance check, tax-free, biggest check I ever got in my life. And I didn't spend a single dime of that. I bought some real estate in Columbus and invested the rest in, different stocks. And obviously the market, just if you're doing an index fund, has ripped, but I did well on some individual stocks, and the real estate Columbus as a city has exploded. So that's been good. The other thing is now I'm married with my wife. So my financial plan, and she has a great stable job, tech sales here in the city. So things have changed a little bit for us. We'd like to start a family and buy a house one day, but I'm pretty by the book of pay yourself first when the money comes in, investing in the stock market, planning for the future, whether it's kids in a house, and then, down the line, we're lucky to have some disposable income to travel and do fun things.
Yeah, I didn't know that about you, that you got the insurance check after your injury at Michigan. So, because I've known guys who have gotten that. I actually tried to get a policy when I was in college, but I had too much injury history. They wouldn't insure me. It was a good move by the insurance companies, clearly.
Well,
But go ahead. I'm curious how that works.
yeah. So that was I tore my right ACL my sophomore year. And that was a big reason. A lot of agents were telling me, hey, you should come out after your junior year. But I had my mind made up and I decided to come back. And then once I committed, they're like, all right, we got to get you an insurance policy. Well, we were with whatever the major company was. I can't remember. I don't think it was Lloyd's of London, because I believe I signed with the Lloyd's of London. But there was another major company that said, all right, we'll insure everything but your right knee. And we're like, that makes no sense. That's the only injury I ever had in my life. So we went out and shopped and found another insurance company that said, all right, we'll insure your right knee after the first 4 games of your senior year. So I was like, okay, as long as I don't get hurt in those games, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
Got hurt in the bowl game, the last game of my career. And after I was done feeling sorry for myself, I had my dad call my agent. We called the insurance company. And right there, those things are hard to capitalize on. But the insurance company was like, yeah, this is going to be as cut and dry of a case as we've ever had. You're going to be able to collect on this. And it was the same thing you're saying, though, AB, is they did not want to insure my knee. And had I not went out and shopped, I would not have collected that check. Or had I got injured week 1, week 2, I would have not collected the check. So those are less popular these days because they're really hard to collect on, it seems.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, it's one thing to get the policy. Even if you get injured, a lot of times they don't pay it out, or you got to sue the insurance company, and because they'll try to claim different things that kind of protect the insurance company to not have to pay it out. But it sounds like yours was cut and dry.
Another thing that's interesting is the way it works, and this is how it was explained to me. So since when you collect, it's tax free. What they do is the insurance companies have their own like front office, and they
Mhm.
project where they think you would get drafted had you came out at the time of getting the policy. So for me, they said Hunter Henry was like the 35th pick. So they're like, all right, we'd say you were competing for that top spot. So they projected me as like the 35th or 37th pick, which meant a contract value of like $6.5 million.
Mhm.
Okay. So then the next year, they took the 6.5 and divided it by two. It ended up being like 3.2 or $3.3 million. Then collected on everything below that mark of the gross total of the value of my total contract that I signed. So I signed like a $2.7 million deal. You can do the difference between 3.2 is what it was. But a lot of guys, if you're not going to be drafted in the
Interesting.
first two rounds, it doesn't make sense, because once they cut your contract in half, starting in the third
Yeah.
or fourth round, it's below what you would make as an undrafted free agent. So it doesn't make sense to even sign
Yeah.
in undrafted or
Interesting. I
insurance
didn't
policy.
realize that's how they do it.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Pretty interesting, right?
Yeah, there's so many different like business aspects of this sport that people don't realize.
Yeah.
It's really cool. I want to ask about the UFL. You've done some broadcasting for the UFL and have seen that league up close. What's the potential you think of that league to actually become a minor league system for the NFL?
So there's the potential to be a minor league system. And then there's just the potential for the league as a bubble, because right now there's no partnership with the NFL. And I think long term, they would like to find a way to have, some alignment. And it makes sense too, honestly. It makes a ton of sense. It's particularly from an O-line standpoint, like developing certain position groups that are underdeveloped typically when they get
Yeah.
to the NFL. But I think there's an appetite for spring pro football in America. And we part of this is just like being able to stay alive for a few years, because remember when COVID happened, I had so many buddies that were dialed into the XFL, like that and the original UFL, and just the leagues got shut down right away. So I think what you had was a league get started up and then shut down, a league get started up and shut down, and now here comes the current UFL XFL merger, and it's taken a few years. I think fans have been hesitant to invest into that league because they expect it to get shut down.
Yeah.
Every year that league survives and gets better, I think it plays to the strength of that league. And then eventually, like you said, if they can partner with the NFL, it'll be even better. But I think there's an appetite for it. And the league's gotten better every year. There's some entertaining football that gets played. So, and I've enjoyed covering on the sidelines.
Yeah, it's a good point. I feel like with the lack of success that some of the other XFL, what was the AAF or some of these other leagues that got shut down quickly, it kind of hurts the reputation of these new leagues. So like you said, every year the UFL can survive. 5 years from now, if it's still around, it'll be a real piece of football, of the football ecosystem, the football
Yeah.
culture in America. And I think with sports betting, that people are going to want something to bet on in the off season, which leads me to my next question, Jake. We've talked a lot about sports betting, and I work with Prize Picks. They sponsor this podcast, and you and I have talked a lot about it. What it means for media personalities, what it means for broadcasting. Uh, you know, Sports betting was taboo for so long. Now you see even TV networks embracing sports betting, and NFL and college NFL teams sponsored by sports books. What's your take on sports betting and its place in sports and really in college sports?
Yeah. Wow. This is we could have a full conversation about it. It's the first take is it's inevitable. And it's like a law of physics that like nothing rests. Okay. This is just like think of like the human race as its own entity. We're always trying to grow, which is what led us to Sports Center. Like, what's the next big revenue growth opportunity for the NFL and sports in general? And it's obviously sports betting, and it's going to continue to grow to grow. So whether you agree with it or not, I'm pretty libertarian in the sense like if people want to bet, that's their right to bet, and I
Yeah.
think that you have now a free market that's giving people the opportunity to do that. But yeah, man, it's inevitable. the players will benefit from it too, because the revenue stream in the NFL is going to go up, which is going to boost the salary cap, and part of that gets back to the players. So it's inevitable. It'll change, just like anything over time. It'll change, and you got to put protections in place. And you saw some of that with guys like throwing games in the NBA, and that'll always be a concern. But I don't think that that's ever going to materially affect the product on the field. But it's only going to become a more integrated part of sports.
Yeah, and you see how I've seen how it helps drive engagement and viewership with fans. I would call last year. I called a couple midweek Maction games on like a Tuesday night, and you can tell by Twitter and every X and social media how many people are engaged in watching the game. That those games would get more. I would get tons of people hitting me up about the game, and they're probably watching because they're betting on the game. They want to bet on a game on Tuesday night, not because they actually care about the Ball State Western Michigan game.
Yeah, I mean, how many of my friend group? I mean, it's probably 10-1 of people I know that bet on some regular schedule versus people that don't bet. It might even be 20-1 or 25-1. That's where we're at.
Everyone I know bets on sports.
Yeah.
I mean, basically everyone who likes sports. There's obviously different levels of betting on sports, right. But everyone I know does. So let me ask you this. If it keeps becoming such a bigger part of football culture in America, at what point, or do you ever think there will come a time where, as broadcasters of major TV networks, we are talking about betting lines in the game? I think about I remember early on in my broadcasting career, a couple of years ago, Jake, I said something like, I called a team a big underdog, or maybe I called them like a heavy favorite or something like that. And I got kind of reprimanded of like, you can't call a team a heavy favorite. You're referring to the betting line.
Yeah.
But now it's getting more kind of accepted to talk about betting, but it's still not direct. You're still not saying they're a 4-point underdog. His over-under's at 220 yards rushing, where it feels like everyone watching the game, that's probably relevant information for them to know. So what do you think it'll ever come a time where we're doing that?
Yeah, and you're seeing that because of the alignment with different networks and sports books. Like ESPN has their own betting app, right? Yeah. Like Fox and the UFL are aligned with different, so yes, it's absolutely where we're heading. I understand the hesitancy to fully embrace that. Like, you can't just go from not talking about it to fully embracing it, but we're seeing the early stages of that. Like, we'll look back 10 years from now when that is a reality and look at this time as like the adolescent years of fully embracing sports betting.
Yeah. Is there a team in 2025 college football that you're most excited to see play? Is there kind of a underdog team or a sleeper team that you're like, man, I don't think anyone's talking about them enough?
Illinois is really interesting. And I, as I said earlier, I'm a big Brett Bielema fan, and that was such a special year for them last year to get to 10 wins. And Brett's a good coach. Like, when we talk about coaches of the year, it normally goes to Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Oregon. But what about the coaches that constantly exceed expectations? Because Illinois is never going to have the most talent. And so they have 10 wins, return 18 of their 22 starters, all 5 O-linemen. Luke Altmaier, wouldn't shock me if he ends up being the first or second best quarterback in the conference this year. Certainly he's a top 5 quarterback in the conference. And it feels like for some of these programs, like the stars kind of have to align a little bit to have a special season. Like, you need to have a veteran roster that's talented and experienced. Michigan, when they finally got over the hump and won the national championship, that's what happened. Ohio State last year. Penn State feels the same this year, right? But Illinois is one that doesn't get discussed enough that can make some noise.
Is this the year Penn State can win the national championship? What do you think?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, man, and it feels like it. It feels like the stars have aligned in a sense, and you certainly can't be more pot committed than what Penn State. I wanted to ask you what the buzz was about the transfer portal wide receivers, and because that's the big thing. I think we saw Drew Aller really grow late in that season and in the postseason, but he just didn't have guys to separate beyond Tyler Warren. What are you hearing about the wide receiver group?
So I was up there. I think it was like practice 5 of spring ball, so still pretty early, but I was asking everyone, obviously, off camera about the wide receivers, and they were raving about them. Said that both Hudson, Ross were making some huge catches in practice, and one of the coaches was telling me that I forget which receiver it was. I want to say it was Ross, the Devontae Ross made a wild catch in the end of practice 2 minute drill to like win. At the end of
Yeah.
every practice, a lot of times you do 2 minute drill. The
Yeah.
coaches will come up with, hey, a minute 20 on the clock, down by 6 points, with one timeout, and you play out the situation. And it's always who steps up in those moments that tells you who's the real dog. And
Yeah.
apparently the receivers played really well in that. So that made me hopeful. I thought being around Jim Knowles was really just weird to see him at Penn State, especially after he was at Ohio State. Jake, I posted that Jim Knowles was going to be a top target for Penn State to go after a D coordinator. Coach Franklin mentioned it in my interview with him when I sat down with him during spring ball. He was like, man, you were getting roasted. People were killing me, Jake. I mean, I
I
was
was
getting
roasting you. I was like,
people were,
what are
oh
you
yeah, you
talking
did.
about?
You were texting me like, what are
Yeah,
you making this up?
I
And it's
couldn't
funny
see
because,
it.
well, it's funny because I when I put that out, first of all, it made sense in my mind of like Jim Knowles, Penn State guy, Pennsylvania. I knew Franklin and Pat Kraft would go after the very best in the country. But I also started to get some texts, people saying Jim Knowles' name to me. And if you hear the name enough times, you're like, there's got to be something there.
Yeah.
So I put it out there and just said, and put it on the list. And I certainly, it's funny because I actually thought about deleting it. Like, I was getting crushed so bad that I almost took it down and ended up being right, which is crazy. But I talked to Franklin. He said, when you put that out, he's like, we had not ever talked to Jim Knowles at that point. He was
Mhm.
like, this came like, well, weeks later. I guess something happened with Knowles and Ohio State. I'm not
Yeah.
sure the true story. That's just what I heard through the grapevine from other people. And he ended up calling Franklin and saying, would you be interested? Which is crazy.
There's a ton of pressure on him though, man. I mean, to be the
Yeah,
highest paid coordinator and with all the expectations for Penn State this year, there's a ton of pressure on him. And I mean, he grew up in the area, right? Like some of your interviews and clips with him have been fascinating to learn. Like he clearly has just an organic love for the university and the program. And I think that'll serve them well. So it's exciting time for Penn State.
yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Last few things for you, man. I feel like a lot of athletes, even non-athletes, struggle with their purpose after something important ends, after maybe the game ends for you, after your career ends, um, after there's some big change in life. What do you think helped you rebuild your purpose the most when football ended?
Mm. Honestly, man, like I still struggle with it sometimes, but like I guess that's not the right word. I don't give myself you got to give yourself a chance. And I think how you structure your day is key. The the more time you spend scrolling on your phone,
Yeah,
you're going to feel purposeless. Okay. And suddenly you leave the game as a player where your entire days are structured and everybody's telling you what to do. And you have easy ways to push your body and mind in the weight room and in practice. And then all of a sudden that stops. You have to like be curious. You have to be willing to try different things and maybe look foolish. Have conversations with people where you're the dumbest person in the room,
yeah,
and just understand like over time you'll figure it out, but you have to be willing to put yourself out there. One thing that helped me, man, is like I journaled, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I journaled about the things I wanted my life to look like I said I want to have a flexible schedule. I want to travel. I want to
mhm,
use my voice. Like I felt like, I enjoyed public speaking. I wanted to use my voice and I wanted to, do something that I loved doing. And eventually, as you can see, what I'm currently doing, it all kind of fell into place. And I think it requires these players get clear on what you want, because now it's a complete open canvas, blank canvas for players to figure out. But you need to spend some time thinking about what that might look like.
yeah. One thing I've always loved about you and respected about you is you have a great curiosity to you. Like you always want to know new things or learn new things or understand new things. Where do you think that comes from?
Hmm.
Yeah, and first, do you agree? Do you feel, is that something you feel like you identify with, like being a curious person who wants to learn constantly?
Yeah, it absolutely does. Honestly, man, I think like a lot of it comes from like suffering and like the adversity. Like I
Yeah.
know you agree with this. Like I look at your career as a player and then coaching, and I know that that's what I went through with my injuries, especially in the NFL. And it's all of a sudden, like, I think like the most dangerous place you could be is if you're uncomfortable, but you're not uncomfortable enough where you're not forced to change or take
Yeah.
action. Cause then you just live in this like zone of stagnation. But when you're dealing with injuries and your life dream is ripped out from under you, you kind of are forced to ask questions you wouldn't have asked otherwise. And you're
Yeah.
forced to be curious about things. Otherwise, gosh, man, some of those days were really tough. And eventually I just figured, hey, this is a fun way to live life, being
Yeah.
curious about things and asking questions. So it kind of happened organically.
Yeah. How's your relationship with time? Like, do you ever? I feel I just turned 30. I think you're 29, turn 30 soon, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
30 in
I
July.
just
Yep.
turned 30. And I felt like when I turned 30 a month or so ago, you almost feel like, oh, everything speeds up a little bit. I'm like, oh, I gotta, oh, I'm 30. What have I built? What am I doing? What's the next 5 years? In 5 years I'm 35. In 10 years I'm 40.
Yeah.
And I think about the perspective of time all the time. Gary Vaynerchuk says something all the time about having um, macro patience and micro speed, and I try to live
Mm.
by that. But I get caught up in like, man, we got to go. You got to go. You got to go. You got to move fast. How's your relationship with that? Do you ever think and struggle with that a little bit?
100%. And it's also both too, is I don't think I think we all like strive for like equilibrium, but you never reach equilibrium, like there'll be periods like I know last fall, I probably said yes to way too many things. And I said yes, that was in like July when I was doing nothing. And I was like, man, I can't wait to go for this. I said yes to way too many things and it was exhausting and probably worked against me. So now I'm approaching this next fall with that level of awareness, right? So there's just constantly like a little bit of an ebb and flow, and got to have some grace with yourself.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. When people say the name Jake Butt in 5 years, what do you want them to associate with
Man, honestly, I hope I want to be a dad. I want to be
it?
that'd be like the most important thing is to be a dad, someone that gives back to others. I think that's something that's on my heart for sure. Um, I think those are the two most important things. I think everything else will fall into place.
I love it. I love it, man.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm hopeful it's coming soon for you.
Yeah.
It's got to
So
be.
appreciate you, man. Yeah.
Well, no, this has been awesome, man. I always love talking to you. We always have some great conversations. Can I get your Big Ten champion prediction on the show to wrap it up, or is it too early to put that on the record?
I mean, it's if I had to bet, it's going to be Penn State against Ohio State. I think Ohio State is absolutely loaded still. There's going to be some
Yeah,
new names,
scary.
but those guys are 5 stars and future NFL players.
Yeah,
And I'd love to see that matchup. And maybe it's the year, man. It does feel like it has to be the year for Penn State to get over the hump. So I'll pick your alma mater to
yeah.
win.
What real quick? What do you think? What's the pulse on Michigan right now? I was out there this offseason, sat down with Strom Moore. I mean, the everything felt great in the program, but you still have kind of the lingering issues of all the drama that went on there. What's the pulse?
Yeah, I think they you have to like look at this all each piece connects and
Yeah,
they believe they have a defense. That defense is the defense, that played against Alabama. Okay. Like
yeah,
Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Will Johnson, those guys didn't play. So the same defense you saw in the bowl game is going to be back this year with some added transfers. They think the defense is championship level and will keep them in every game. And I say that because that's ultimately going to play into who plays quarterback because you have Mikey Keene, who's more experienced and trustworthy, but they're really excited about Bryce Underwood from a talent standpoint. So how quickly can they include we trust Bryce Underwood into the equation will decide, how quickly he plays. And if he can get up to speed quickly, that's a talent that Michigan has never had and very few college programs have. I mean, he's that good. So
yeah.
defense will keep him in every game. It's what can they get out of that offense that will decide the ceiling.
Yeah, what's the early analysis on Bryce Underwood? Everything is he as advertised?
Dude, he looks like, I mean, if he looks like he could play tight end. I mean, he's
Yeah,
just a
he's a big
freak.
kid.
The ball jumps out of his hands. When Drew was a freshman, when the ball
Yeah,
would leave his hands, you're like, wow, that's
yeah.
different. Like
You
you
talking
get a little
Drew
bit of
Aller?
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
even in Drew's special, it's probably even another level
yeah,
because of he's an excellent athlete too. Bryce
yeah,
Underwood can run. A true dynamic dual threat quarterback. But again, it's Michigan. It's everything else needs to come together. They hired Chip Lindsey as an offensive coordinator. Okay, that's good. You bring in some key pieces at the wide receiver position. The running back room's good, but can it like all come together to help this young
yeah,
quarterback?
yeah, yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense. I'm
Yeah,
excited to see it play out. Jake Butt, appreciate you coming on, man. Always fun.
always a pleasure, man. Good to see you.
Next up.